The desert night was silent, broken only by the rustling of dry grass around the wooden crosses. Samuel Carter stood before his father's grave, the dirt still fresh, his heart heavy with sorrow. The moonlight carved sharp shadows across the weathered tombstones, and Samuel whispered, "Father, I swear I'll find the truth." A sudden crack split the silence, a rifle shot echoing from the ridge. The bullet tore into the headstone, scattering stone dust over Samuel's face. His hand gripped the revolver at his hip, eyes scanning the dark hills. He remembered his father's voice, steady and calm, warning him that enemies never rest. Samuel's pulse pounded as he muttered, "You won't drive me away." The desert air carried the faint sound of hooves retreating into the night. Samuel dropped to one knee, brushing the shattered stone, his voice raw with grief. "They desecrate your grave, Father, but I'll carry your fight." Lightning flickered beyond the horizon, painting the storm clouds in a haunting glow. He felt the weight of justice pressing on his shoulders, heavier than the revolver in his hand. The dawn crept over the desert, painting the sky in crimson and gold. Samuel Carter lingered by his father's grave, exhaustion etched in his face. He whispered, "This land remembers blood, Father." The wind carried the scent of dust and sage as the town bells rang faintly in the distance. Samuel adjusted his coat and turned toward the settlement, his boots crunching on dry earth. Every step seemed to echo the burden of a promise unfulfilled. Memories of John Carter's voice urging him toward honor filled his mind, even as Samuel's heart longed for revenge. He muttered, "They think I'll bend, but I'll burn before I bow." The trail stretched long and lonely, a path leading to conflict he could not avoid. His father's grave faded behind him, but the weight of it clung to his soul. The town of Dry Creek stirred awake under the rising sun. Samuel Carter's boots struck the wooden planks of the main street, his eyes scanning the shops and saloons. Townsfolk avoided his gaze, whispers trailing behind him like shadows. A young boy pointed before being hushed by his mother, fear visible in their eyes. Samuel muttered, "So the lies run deep." The sheriff's office loomed at the far end, its doors closed, its windows dark. Samuel's jaw tightened as he felt the town's judgment weighing heavy. He clenched his fist and whispered, "If justice hides here, I'll drag it out." Near the water trough, Daniel Reed, age 20, leaned nervously against a post. He called softly, "Samuel, wait." Samuel Carter paused, his eyes sharp, scanning the boy. Daniel swallowed hard, saying, "Your father was a good man and he didn't deserve this." Samuel's voice was quiet but firm. Words won't mend broken stones. Daniel straightened, fists clenched, his young eyes burning with loyalty. "Then let me stand with you." Samuel looked away, torn between trust and solitude. The silence stretched before Samuel finally muttered, "Loyalty costs blood." At the edge of town, an older man leaned on a cane, watching the streets. William Hayes, age 58, with silver hair and a lined face, studied Samuel Carter. His voice carried a weary wisdom. "Your father believed justice was worth more than vengeance." Samuel's gaze hardened. Justice died with him. William's eyes narrowed, his scar catching the light. "No, Samuel, justice still lives, but vengeance blinds the man who seeks it." The words struck Samuel like a stone, stirring conflict deep within. He turned away, his revolver heavy at his side. William whispered into the dust-laden air, "Choose carefully, son. The graveyard has room for one more Carter." Samuel Carter walked the narrow path beyond Dry Creek, his boots striking stone as the morning sun bled across the desert. His thoughts churned with the burden of his father's grave. He whispered, "Father, your shadow still follows me." The wind rattled dry branches, carrying the memory of John Carter's words about honor. Samuel's hand rested on the revolver at his hip, his grip trembling with doubt. He muttered, "Vengeance or justice, I cannot see the line." Each step forward felt like dragging a chain behind him. The silence of the desert pressed close, broken only by the sound of his breathing. Samuel's eyes lifted to the horizon where the town of Dry Creek shimmered in heat haze. He clenched his teeth and growled, "If blood is all they understand, then blood they will find." The morning sun carved fire across the sky, and Samuel felt as though the earth itself waited for his choice. The stillness shattered as Samuel Carter stepped into a narrow canyon. Shadows clung to the stone walls as two armed riders emerged. Their leader, Sheriff Charles Boone, watched with cold eyes, his badge glinting faintly. Boone sneered, "This land doesn't welcome troublemakers." Samuel's jaw tightened. "I came for answers, not threats." One rider raised his rifle, the barrel gleaming in sunlight. Boone's voice was sharp, "Your father's sins don't buy you mercy." Samuel's heart pounded, but his hand never wavered from his revolver. He spoke through clenched teeth, "Then let the desert judge us." The canyon held its breath, the echo of menace lingering in its stone walls. In the dim saloon, smoke curled through beams of dusty light. Clara Monroe leaned against the bar, her eyes shadowed with secrets. Samuel Carter entered, boots echoing on warped floorboards. Clara's voice was smooth yet guarded. "Samuel, you carry your father's fire, but fire burns both ways." Samuel studied her, suspicion clouding his expression. He muttered, "Whose side are you truly on?" Clara's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed unease. "Sides shift with the wind," she whispered. Samuel's voice dropped low. "If you betray me, I'll know." Clara raised her glass, her reflection fractured in its rim, and said softly, "The desert knows more than men ever will." The room grew heavier with every unspoken word. By the stable's wooden fence, Daniel Reed hurried to meet Samuel Carter, his young eyes wide with resolve. Daniel blurted, "You cannot face them alone, Samuel." Samuel turned slowly, his voice sharp. "Loyalty costs blood, Daniel." The boy clenched his fists, his voice trembling yet firm. "Then I'll spill mine if I must." Samuel's gaze softened for a fleeting moment, shadows of his own youth reflected in Daniel's face. The silence between them stretched before Samuel spoke. "This fight is older than you, boy." Daniel lifted his chin stubbornly. "Then let me grow old in it." Samuel looked toward the hills, his voice low. "You'll regret stepping into graves that aren't yours." Daniel's defiance lingered in the dust. At the outskirts of Dry Creek, William Hayes leaned on his cane, his weathered eyes fixed on Samuel Carter. His voice carried the weight of regret. "Your father's blood wasn't shed for revenge, Samuel." Samuel's lips tightened as he answered, "Then why does his grave cry out for it?" William shifted, the scar on his face catching the dying light. "Because justice is heavier than vengeance, and it breaks the man who carries it wrongly." Samuel's silence burned hotter than words. William sighed. "I saw John Carter fall into the same trap, and it near destroyed him." Samuel's eyes hardened. "Then let me finish what he started." William shook his head slowly. "End what he couldn't, but don't become what he feared." The last rays of sunlight fell across their faces, heavy with unspoken truths. The streets of Dry Creek carried an uneasy silence as Samuel Carter strode past shuttered windows. Mothers drew children inside, and merchants lowered their eyes. Samuel muttered under his breath, "Fear spreads faster than truth." At the corner, whispers traveled like wildfire. A rancher murmured, "John Carter's boy stirs trouble again," and another hissed back, "The sheriff says he'll bring ruin on us all." Samuel's jaw tightened, but his steps never faltered. He paused by the well where townsfolk once welcomed his father, yet now they turned away. He whispered, "Father, your name is poison here." The wooden boards groaned beneath his boots, echoing like a drumbeat of judgment. A dog barked before slinking into shadow. Samuel adjusted his hat, his voice low. "They believe Boone's lies, but I'll make them choke on the truth." Every stare, every whispered curse, carved deeper into his resolve as the town closed its doors against him. At the sheriff's office, the air reeked of stale smoke and iron. Samuel Carter stepped onto the porch, his hand brushing the rail. Sheriff Charles Boone emerged, badge glinting on his chest. Boone's voice was cold. You bring your father's shadow with you. Samuel's eyes burned as he replied, a shadow still carries light. Boone sneered, your father defied the law, and it cost him his life. Samuel leaned forward, his voice sharp. It wasn't the law that killed him, it was the men who hid behind it. Boone rested his hand casually on his revolver, lips curling. You keep poking around, boy, and you'll find yourself in a grave beside him. Samuel's pulse throbbed as the silence thickened. He whispered, justice isn't buried yet. Boone's smirk held, but his eyes flickered. The street around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for sparks to ignite. Behind the saloon, Daniel Reed rushed toward Samuel Carter, his breath ragged, dust rising around his boots. His voice cracked, Samuel, I thought I could track Boone's men, but they saw me. Samuel's face darkened as he pulled Daniel into shadow. Fool boy, he hissed. Thou use your mistake to draw me out. Daniel's chest heaved as he whispered, I only wanted to prove myself. Samuel gripped his shoulder hard. Proving yourself doesn't mean dying, stupid. From the alley's edge, voices echoed, boots scuffing against the dirt. Daniel's eyes widened in panic. Samuel muttered, stay low, keep your breath quiet. The boy's youthful ambition now weighed like a chain around them both. Samuel's gaze flicked to the street, where armed riders surged. He whispered fiercely, your loyalty may cost us both our lives. Daniel's silence trembled, but he nodded, fear mingled with determination. Inside the saloon, Clara Monroe stood near the staircase, her dress catching golden lamplight. Samuel Carter entered, dust clinging to his coat, suspicion heavy in his stare. Clara whispered, you shouldn't be here, Samuel. His voice was iron, your words dance, but your heart betrays you. Clara's fingers toyed with her necklace, her eyes shifting toward the back room. Samuel stepped closer, his voice low, who do you serve? Clara's lips quivered as she whispered, survival doesn't choose sides. Samuel's jaw tightened. Then you've chosen Boone. Clara turned away, hiding her tears in shadow. Not all choices are free, she whispered bitterly. Samuel felt the sting of betrayal coil within him, sharper than any blade. The saloon's silence weighed heavy, every whisper from the corners carrying secrets too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Night fell as Samuel Carter sat at the edge of Dry Creek, staring toward the ridge. The weight of betrayal and suspicion pressed down like the desert sky. He muttered, the enemy's closer than I feared. Behind him, William Hayes stepped slowly from the shadows, leaning on his cane. His voice was quiet but sharp. Truth always hides nearer than a man dares to look. Samuel's head turned, his eyes burning. Boone poisons the town, Clara twists the truth, Daniel bleeds loyalty. Who can I trust? William's face was carved with sorrow as he answered, trust is the sharpest weapon, Samuel, and the most dangerous. The night wind howled as Samuel rose, revolver heavy at his side. He whispered, then I'll fight with both hands open, even if it costs me everything. William's eyes narrowed. Your father walked that same road, and it broke him. Samuel stared into darkness, the desert holding its secrets. The wind carried whispers across Dry Creek, as Samuel Carter uncovered a truth that burned like fire. He stood in the abandoned barn, the air thick with dust and rot. Scrawled papers revealed Sheriff Charles Boone's hand in John Carter's downfall. Samuel's voice trembled. You sold him for land and power. His grip tightened around the crumpled page, veins straining in his hand. Memories of his father's blood pooled in his mind, sharper now with betrayal revealed. Samuel whispered, justice wears a false badge. The barn creaked as if groaning under the weight of lies. Samuel kicked the broken boards, dust exploding around him. He muttered, the grave was dug long before the bullet. His chest heaved as rage burned hotter than grief, the knowledge that Boone's betrayal cut deeper than any wound. The barn fell into silence, but Samuel's vow echoed loud enough for the desert to hear. William Hayes stood outside the barn when Samuel Carter emerged, his face pale with fury. William's eyes were heavy with old sorrow. "The truth cuts sharper than steel," William said softly. Samuel glared, his voice raw. "You knew, didn't you?" William lowered his gaze, his cane tapping the dirt. "I warned John, but he would not listen." Samuel's fists shook. "You'll let him walk into Boone's snare?" William's voice cracked. "I carried that guilt every day." Samuel's silence was heavier than words, his shoulders trembling. William whispered, "You can still choose another path." Samuel turned sharply, spitting the words. "That path is buried with him." The old man's eyes glistened, the scar across his face catching the dying light. "If you walk Boone's road, Samuel, you will not return," William warned. The desert wind screamed between them, carrying grief and truth alike. Inside the saloon, Clara Monroe sat alone at a table, her dress catching lamplight. Her hands trembled as Samuel Carter approached, his eyes burning. Clara whispered, "You found the papers." Samuel's voice was sharp. "Your silence betrayed him." Clara's eyes shimmered, torn between fear and guilt. "Boone owns my life," she confessed, voice breaking. Samuel leaned closer, his words cold. "Then you sold my father's." Clara's tears streaked across powdered cheeks. "I never wanted this," she whispered, clutching her necklace as though it might save her. Samuel's breath was steady, but rage cut through each word. "Your chains don't excuse the grave." Clara looked away, her voice cracking. "I'm already buried, Samuel, just without the dirt." The silence grew heavy, broken only by the clink of distant glasses. Samuel's shadow stretched long across the saloon floor, falling over Clara like judgment itself. Behind the corral, Daniel Reed lay clutching his side, blood staining his shirt. Samuel Carter knelt beside him, fear and fury colliding in his eyes. Daniel gasped, "They found me before I could warn you." Samuel pressed his hand to the wound, voice harsh, "You shouldn't have followed them." Daniel's lips quivered in pain. "I had to prove I wasn't a boy." Samuel whispered fiercely, "You were more man than most in this town." Daniel coughed, blood at his lips. "Don't let Boone win." Samuel's throat tightened as he whispered, "Not while I draw breath." The boy's hand clutched Samuel's arm before slipping weakly away. Samuel's heart roared with guilt, the cost of loyalty carved into flesh. The corral's silence was broken only by Daniel's ragged breaths, fading like a candle in the wind. The graveyard loomed under a storm-lit sky, as Samuel Carter stood before John Carter's resting place. The shattered headstone bore scars of bullets past. Samuel's voice cracked, "Father, they betrayed you, and they bleed me too." Thunder rolled across the desert, a drumbeat for vengeance. Samuel dropped to one knee, his hand pressed against the grave's dirt. "I swore to carry your fight, and I will not falter." His revolver gleamed in the storm's light as he lifted it skyward. "Blood answers blood," he vowed, his voice like iron. The wind howled through the crosses, bending them like mourners. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Samuel's face streaked with fury. His promise to the dead carried weight enough to shake the living. The storm roared in agreement as Samuel whispered, "This battle ends where it began, on your grave." The storm raged over the desert as Samuel Carter unearthed the truth he had long feared. In William Hayes' cabin, an old journal revealed a secret buried in ink and regret. The words cut deep. John Carter's death had been arranged by Sheriff Charles Boone, but it was William Hayes who had once stood at Boone's side. Samuel's voice trembled with fury. "You carried this all these years." William's eyes clouded with pain. "I walked away, but not before it was too late." Samuel slammed the journal shut, dust rising into the stormlit room. "My father was betrayed by more than Boone," he hissed. William's cane shook in his hand, his voice breaking. "I tried to warn him, Samuel. He trusted me." Samuel's glare was as sharp as a blade. "Then you are as guilty as Boone." Silence crushed the cabin as thunder rolled, the weight of revelation pressing on them both. In the saloon, Clara Monroe waited at the bar, her reflection fractured in the mirror behind her. Samuel Carter pushed through the doors, drenched by rain, his revolver heavy at his side. Clara's voice faltered. You know now, don't you? Samuel's stare was cold. You shared Boone's secrets and you shared his bed. Clara's eyes filled with shame, though defiance lingered in her tone. I did what I had to survive. Samuel stepped closer, his boots striking the warped floorboards. My father didn't survive your silence, he spat. Clara's fingers shook as she reached for her glass. I never loved Boone, she whispered, but I feared him more than death. Samuel's words were sharp as lightning. Fear doesn't wash away betrayal. Clara turned her face, her tears hidden in shadow, as thunder rattled the windows. The air between them pulsed with bitterness and broken trust. The wind howled through the canyon where William Hayes led Samuel Carter, his lantern flickering against the rocks. William's voice cracked as he spoke. I followed John Carter once, then I followed Boone. Both roads led to graves. Samuel's eyes blazed in the lantern glow. Then why drag me here? William's gaze was fixed on the ridge above. Because your father died here, Samuel. This is where Boone set the trap. Samuel's breath caught as the truth slammed into him. You were with him. William's voice was broken. I tried to stop it, but Boone already had the men waiting. Samuel clenched his fists, his voice shaking. You carry his blood on your hands. William whispered, and I carry it every day. The canyon walls echoed the confession, the rocks themselves seeming to mourn. Samuel's heart raged with betrayal, the past reshaping his every step. By the jailhouse, Samuel Carter faced Sheriff Charles Boone under the hammering rain. Boone leaned against the rail, his badge gleaming under lamplight. His voice was cruel. Your father thought he could fight the law. He forgot I was the law. Samuel's eyes blazed, his voice cutting like a knife. You were never the law, Boone. Only a coward hiding behind it. Boone's lips curled into a sneer. Your father begged before the bullet took him. Samuel's fists clenched, his revolver trembling at his side. Liar, he growled. Boone chuckled darkly. He left you nothing but dirt and shame. Samuel stepped forward, the rain streaking across his face. He left me a grave, and from it I'll carve your end. Boone's grin faltered for the first time, the storm crackling as if echoing the challenge. The street around them grew tense, every shadow watching. Alone at the graveyard, Samuel Carter stood before John Carter's shattered headstone, his heart pounding with revelation. The rain poured in sheets, soaking him to the bone. He whispered, Father, it wasn't fate that killed you. It was Boone, and those who stood silent. His hands pressed into the wet earth, mud seeping between his fingers. Blood or justice, I must choose. The storm raged like a war around him, lightning splitting the sky. Samuel's revolver gleamed in his grip, thunder rolling like a drumbeat of vengeance. He muttered, They all think vengeance blinds me, but vengeance is all that clears the fog. His face lifted to the sky, rain mixing with his tears. This ends with blood, he vowed, his voice carrying through the storm. The graveyard seemed to tremble under the weight of his choice. The storm eased into silence as dawn painted the desert in pale fire. Samuel Carter stood at the edge of Dry Creek, revolver gleaming, eyes hollow with resolve. He whispered, This day ends in blood or justice. William Hayes approached slowly, leaning on his cane, his voice carrying both wisdom and sorrow. I buried too many men who thought the graveyard was their court. Do not make me bury another Carter. Samuel's jaw tightened, his words sharp. If I fall, it will not be for nothing. Hayes's gaze lingered on him, filled with weary recognition. Your father said those same words, and the earth swallowed him whole. Samuel lifted his hat, placing it firmly on his head as if sealing fate. Then let it swallow me with my gun in hand, he muttered. The desert held its breath, the stillness before the storm of men. Samuel Carter sat on the porch of the abandoned church, his revolver resting on his knee. The air was heavy with dust and silence. Clara Monroe emerged from the shadows, her red dress torn by the storm. Her voice trembled. You mean to die today, Samuel? He lifted his eyes slowly, his words hard, better death than bowing to Boone. Clara's lips quivered as she whispered, "Boone will never love anyone, Samuel. Not even me." Samuel's stare pierced her as he muttered, "Then why keep his secrets?" Her voice cracked, "Because secrets keep me alive." Samuel leaned forward, his tone sharp as steel. "They will bury you too, Clara, and Boone will not mourn." Tears streaked down her face as she whispered, "Perhaps I deserve the grave." Samuel's silence burned, the church bells long silent, now echoing in their absence. The sky darkened again as thunder rolled. William Hayes found Samuel Carter, sharpening his resolve near the corral. Hayes' voice was gravelly, "I cannot fight beside you, but I can leave you words." Samuel did not turn, his revolver gleaming in his hand. "Then speak them now, for I may not hear them tomorrow." Hayes sighed deeply, the weight of years in his tone. "Do not kill Boone to avenge John Carter. Kill him because he killed justice." Samuel's eyes narrowed, his voice steady. "And what will justice give me? My father back?" Hayes shook his head, leaning heavier on his cane. "No, Samuel. Justice will only give you peace when the grave finally calls you." Samuel rose, his shadow stretching across the corral. "Then let justice and vengeance meet at Boone's grave," he muttered. Hayes closed his eyes, as if already mourning the dawn. High noon blazed as Samuel Carter walked into the graveyard, his boots striking dry earth like gunshots. Sheriff Charles Boone waited among the crosses, his polished revolver glinting. Boone's voice carried, "Your father stood here once, Samuel. He died begging." Samuel's eyes narrowed, his hand steady near his gun. "My father died standing, and I'll prove it with your blood." The silence between them was suffocating, the heat pressing like iron. Boone smirked, "The town will remember me as Law. You will be forgotten as dust." Samuel's jaw clenched, sweat dripping from his brow. "The grave remembers truth, Boone, and truth waits for you." The church bell tolled once, breaking the silence, marking the moment when words gave way to bullets. Both men's hands hovered, the graveyard ready to baptize itself in blood. The world exploded in gunfire. Samuel Carter's revolver roared, the shot tearing through the silence. Sheriff Charles Boone's gun barked back, dirt leaping where bullets struck. Samuel rolled behind a cross, his breath ragged, then rose with fury. Boone staggered, his badge glinting as a bullet grazed his shoulder. "You cannot kill the law," Boone snarled, his voice dripping with arrogance. Samuel's eyes burned as he fired again, his words carrying like thunder. "You were never the law." Boone stumbled, his revolver shaking, before another shot struck true. Blood blossomed across his chest as he dropped to his knees. Samuel stood tall, revolver steady, voice sharp as a blade. "This ends where it began. On my father's grave." Boone's body collapsed, the dust swallowing him whole. The graveyard fell silent, broken only by the echoes of vengeance and justice colliding. The graveyard fell silent after the thunder of gunfire. Sheriff Charles Boone lay in the dust, his revolver slipping from lifeless fingers. Samuel Carter stood over him, chest heaving, rain-soaked earth clinging to his boots. He whispered, "Justice lies here, though it is stained with blood." The storm broke into fading drizzle, clouds drifting apart as pale sunlight touched the crosses. Samuel's eyes moved to John Carter's grave, his voice breaking, "Father, the battle is done." The weight of vengeance slid from his shoulders, leaving only the emptiness of what was lost. Around him, the wind carried whispers of the town that would never forget this day. He holstered his revolver slowly, as though laying a weapon into a coffin. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of rain dripping from stone. Samuel muttered, "Justice lives, but it leaves no peace." By the corral, Daniel Reed sat slumped against the fence, his bandaged side still weak from blood loss. His young eyes followed Samuel Carter as he approached. Daniel's voice was hoarse, "Did you finish it?" Samuel's expression was carved in stone, his words quiet. "Boone won't cast shadows anymore." Daniel nodded, his lips trembling. Then my blood wasn't wasted. Samuel knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his shoulder. No blood should have been spilled, Daniel, he muttered. The boy's gaze flicked away, shame and pride battling within him. Samuel whispered, "You gave me more than loyalty. You gave me strength." Daniel's silence was heavy, the truth of sacrifice too deep for words. The morning air was sharp, carrying the scent of dust and rain. Samuel rose slowly, his boots crunching as Daniel leaned back against the fence, eyes heavy with pain but alive. Inside the dim saloon, Clara Monroe sat at the bar, her reflection fractured in cracked glass. The room was hushed, every eye watching Samuel Carter as he entered. Clara's voice was soft, "It's over." Samuel's stare pierced through the smoke. Boone is buried, but so are the pieces he left behind. Clara's hand trembled as she lifted her glass, whispering, "I wanted to escape him, but I never did." Samuel's tone was cold as iron. "Your silence chained you to his grave." Clara's eyes filled with tears, her whisper fragile, "Then I'll carry that grave within me." Samuel's gaze lingered on her, torn between pity and disdain, before he muttered, "The desert buries secrets, Clara. And it buries the guilty too." She lowered her glass, her silence more painful than her words. The saloon air pressed heavy with the weight of unfinished redemption. At the town's edge, William Hayes leaned on his cane, his eyes heavy with years. Samuel Carter approached, dust clinging to his coat, revolver silent at his side. William's voice carried deep sorrow. "John Carter chose the path of vengeance, and it killed him. You chose the same, Samuel." Samuel's gaze lifted to the horizon, his words flat. "I chose justice, even if it cost me my soul." William's eyes narrowed, his scar catching the light. "Justice does not come from a gun, Samuel. It comes from what you leave behind." Samuel's silence hung heavy, the truth cutting deeper than bullets. William sighed, his shoulders stooped, whispering, "The graveyard has claimed Boone, but do not let it claim you." Samuel adjusted his hat, muttering, "The graveyard took enough Carters. It won't take me yet." The final light of day bled across the desert as Samuel Carter stood once more at John Carter's grave. The shattered headstone gleamed in the fading sun, rainwater glistening on its cracks. Samuel placed his hat gently upon the grave, his voice low, "Father, vengeance is done, but justice still breathes." His revolver hung heavy in his hand, before he holstered it with finality. "I will not die in your shadow," he whispered. The wind carried his words across the crosses, a vow sealed in silence. He turned toward the horizon, the sky painted in fire and ash, each step carrying him away from the ghosts. The graveyard behind him seemed to sigh, as if finally at rest. Samuel's figure grew smaller against the desert vastness, until only the storm's memory lingered. Justice had been carved into the earth, but peace was a price yet unpaid.